This is Goku Sun DBZ, and welcome back to Top 10 Sunday. And today I will be getting down. Originally I was going to do a top 10 song list for Primal Fear. I may do that next week, but instead I've been playing some games and I started thinking, what are I consider 10 of the most underrated games ever? These are, in my view, 10 of the most underrated games, hands down, no matter console, but it has to be some I personally have, that I've collected over the years. And here they are. But today, I'm going to do honorable mentions first. First honorable mention was released for the original PlayStation. It is called Fighting Force. It was actually a beat-em-up style game. For the time period, it was one of the few decent quality original PlayStation games, or should I say 3D beat-em-ups. And that's one thing that was actually really good about it. Another one, this is definitely hands down a very underrated game. It is called Eternal Champions. Obviously, you can tell like a Wolfman and stuff, special. As some people consider it to be a cheap knockoff of Mortal Kombat. I can see where they come from. Of course, it was produced by Sega, obviously. And they have their own versions of, like, you could say, fatalities. But it was a rated T game. It didn't really have blood and gore like Mortal Kombat. Well, it's actually not a bad game. If you ever get a chance, you should check it out. Next honorable mention. It came out, actually, from multiple consoles, but this is the only one I was able to ever track down. Obviously not with the original case. It's called Forsaken. And in a trailer and stuff, they would say the future is Forsaken. Now, they also had released it on the N64. It was particularly known for having a 4-player multiplayer mode. One of the few games, but actually had pretty good gameplay, very interesting weaponry. I personally really enjoyed this particular game. It's really good if you ever get a chance to try out Forsaken. Next one, honorable mention, was released for multiple consoles, but this is obviously the one I managed to get. It's produced by Activision, the first game, and it's called Vigilante 8. It's actually a really fun, really great game. Ever get a chance to ever play Vigilante, you should actually try it out, seriously. It's a lot like, I guess you could say, Twisted Metal, but better music, to be fair, than the old Twisted Metal games, overall musically speaking. Interesting specialties and stuff. You had all kinds of unlockable stuff. And the funny part is the cheat code you would use so you couldn't die in the game got invincibility. And get this, the actual password in the game is I will not die. And then you get invincibility. That's just hilariously ridiculous. I will not die as a password. But a lot earlier Activision games were known for doing passwords and stuff. Next one is produced by Sega Games, but it was released for the PlayStation 2. It's called Shinobi. Now, this was a particular game in the series. Of course, they have multiple games over multiple consoles. This is the only one, personally, I've ever gotten a hold of. I found it, like, several years back when GameStop was emptying out their inventory PS2 stuff, and I picked this up for 99 cents. Yeah, it's ridiculous. $1. And it's an incredible game. It's worth far more than that. I will say that. But if you ever get a chance to try Shinobi on the PS2, trust me, it's a really fun ninja game. Definitely a great one. Has good gameplay as well. Produced by Konami. The only one in the Yugioh series, I actually think, actually had more original type of gameplay. Considering you can move, turn the cards around and stuff, it was all in full 3D and stuff. It wasn't like the traditional card game. You can move them around on like a big board and stuff. I guess some elements kind of remind you a little bit of like Dungeons and Dragons or something. But it's a really good game. It's called Yugioh, the Duelist of the Roses, and it was exclusively PS2 only. Really good game, though you won't see me buy any Konami games of nowadays. Now this is a game I feel is very overly hated, and I don't know why. Released on the PS2, Devil May Cry 2. I know it really didn't evolve too much from the first game, and I think that's the problem a lot of people have, especially more so overly hated after the praise of Devil May Cry 3. And I don't get all the hate towards the game. Here's the next honorable mention. This was exclusively on the original PlayStation. Now this was made by a small division of actually Midway, and the makers of the original Armored Core games. This is called Colony Wars. Obviously it's a space shooter type game. It's a really fun game series, and I highly recommend you check it out. Trust me, this is not a very expensive game. I picked it up recently for about $3 at a flea market. Trust me, it's definitely worth $3. Really fun game. And until there's like 3 games in the series, I believe. The third game was called Colony Wars Red Sun, which I also managed to find, interestingly enough. I've yet to pick back up the second game. And those are pretty much all of the honorable mentions, except for this. The last honorable mention, released on the 360, it's called Lost Odyssey. It's a great JRPG series game exclusively, and it has really good gameplay overall. And it's actually made by some of the people who worked on Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII. And given I'm such a big Final Fantasy fan, it's no surprise I ended up really enjoying this game. I think it's great. It has lots of side quests and lots of stipulations, as well as one thing that makes it interesting. Coming in at number 10 on the original Xbox. It's a puzzle / RPG type game. It's predominantly obviously puzzle, but it does feel a little bit like an RPG, or rather a role-playing type game, because the overall gameplay, though it has obviously a lot of puzzles, but unlike the I forget what the other puzzle game series is called. Miss. Unlike Miss, it doesn't use live action stuff, it's all CG. But it's a really great game, and I highly recommend you check it out, whether it's on original Xbox or on PC. You should check it out. If you enjoy puzzle type games, trust me, you'll definitely enjoy Siberia. And it's definitely got a pretty high difficulty on the actual puzzles. So that's the other perk to it, is the difficulty level. Coming in at number 9. Now, obviously with the new game, which right now I'm playing, and I'm thinking about doing a discussion / review of the sequel, which I'm almost towards the end of right now, called Mirror's Edge Catalyst. And number 9 is Mirror's Edge. Of course, this being the 360 edition, which was easier to get a hold of. All the stores around here where I live do not have any, weirdly enough, copies available of the PS3 version. But I got this a few years back. Great game, very underrated. It's interesting now, with the new game come out, all of a sudden people are now going out and buying this. I was playing this a few years back before it started becoming very well known. It was more of an underground game. It does have elements of puzzle solving, sort of like a little game called Portal. And also comes in the first-person aspect of Portal, obviously. Now, the art style is one of the things I love about this game. And the gameplay is a lot of fun, too. Now, I will say, I kind of like a little bit of the storyline better in the Catalyst overall compared to this one. But it depends on your own perspective on things, but still, this is a great game and a highly underrated game as far as I'm concerned. And if you ever get a chance to play Mirror's Edge and the new one, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, trust me, it's a great game. You will not be disappointed if you enjoy things involving puzzles and actually have to use your brain. And the free roaming, because it's a little more open world in the new game compared to the more limitations of the original game, given that was like 6-7 years ago, keep in mind. Coming in at number 8 is another game I actually came across when one of my local GameStops was emptying out. This was also $1. Now this is the PS2 version called Phantasy Star Universe. Part of the Sega Phantasy Star well-known series, of course. But this is definitely a great game. I highly recommend you play it. And it does it up and divides up into episodes. Like a TV series, even has an opening credits, intro and everything like an anime series or something, which is just awesome. The music is good. The graphics are good, given this was, at the very big, this was probably around 2005, 2006 time frame when this came out. The graphics may not have been the best compared to other games of that time, but is still hands down a very underrated game. And if you've ever played any of the Phantasy Star games or like RPGs and stuff, trust me, you'll like this. Now, it's not turn-based, it's more free-roaming type RPG. So it's more of an action RPG in that aspect, rather than a JRPG. Coming in at number 8. Now I have the Dreamcast version called Hydro Thunder for the Sega Dreamcast, of course. And now obviously you also had this released on the PlayStation and the N64. Now the PlayStation version was a little more limited because the load times were a little slower than the Dreamcast. Yeah, it was a little faster on the Xbox, but both the N64 and the PlayStation versions graphically was inferior to the Dreamcast version because of it having a stronger, more powerful hardware in it, and being a Generation 6 console. Being out, and it could rival the PlayStation 2 in graphic capability, along with the original GameCube. But this is a great game, and definitely the superior version between the different versions that were out on the Hydro Thunder. And I'm not a big sports person or racing fan, but Hydro Thunder is one that I very much enjoy. I still play all these years later. Coming in at number 6. I've done a little bit of a play-by and a review before a couple rounds of. It's called Strega. It was released, of course, on the original PlayStation, the PSX. Now, Strega was an interesting fighting game because you could move around freely around the stage, sort of like Power Stone, Bushido Blade, and games of that nature. You weren't limited to one just little tiny thing. Some of the stages were bigger than others, but it would allow you to get behind something where you could take cover and avoid getting hit. And you could shoot energy blasts of different types, depending on the character, obviously. One could throw like light as a weapon, one could shoot darkness, Zauber. You have one that could shoot fire, one that can do electricity, one that can do ice. You get the point. And does have a lot of similarities, and graphically speaking, some of the character designs remind me a little bit of like a Square art style, but it's done by a virtually unknown game company. It's a shame they never really pushed this game. This game sold under 1 million copies worldwide. It sold only something like 400,000 or 500,000 copies worldwide. It's a shame. It's such an undervalued, underrated fighting game. I mean, you can find this maybe $5 or something. I bought this from Blockbuster when Blockbuster went out of business. They had this on clearance at like $2. So, trust me, it's a very undervalued, very underrated game. Personally, probably one of my top 10 favorite fighting games of all time, hands down. And it's amazing how few people have ever even heard of this game. It's beyond me. Coming in at number 5. Released for the original Xbox, produced by BioWare, and I believe it was also released for PC. And of course, the original Xbox, as I said, Jade Empire, which gameplay-wise and stuff and abilities reminded you very much so of, I guess you could say, Fable on a lot of aspects. And it's such an underrated RPG. Such a great action RPG. And as I said, gameplay reminds me a lot of Fable, which may be one of the reasons why I love it so much. But this was an earlier introduction. Also, it would be one of the first games where they would have the introduction of the good and evil choice system on the moral values and stuff. It's such a great game, though, overall. And I highly recommend you check out if you ever get a chance to play Jade Empire. I mean, you can easily get this game for probably under $10 in mint condition like I did. Trust me. If you have a local retro gaming store or someplace you can get and you find one in decent condition for a reasonable price, get Jade Empire. It's got probably about 20 to 30 hour time frame story mode. It's a good, fun game, and you can do multiple playthroughs, because I've played it probably 5 times. Really funny, enjoyable. Plus, it's made by the same people who did Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and of course, also some of the elements in this would end up influencing the Dragon Age series. So, just a little bit of piece of information you may not know. Coming in at number 5 is a tie. The first, both on Dreamcast by the way, is a great JRPG called Time Stalkers. It's a great game, and I highly recommend, if you get the opportunity to play this, or if you've ever thought about getting a Dreamcast and want to get one, trust me when I say this is definitely worth getting. It's a hands down great game series, or rather game, since it was never a, I guess you could say, Final Fantasy game on Sega. This was truly very similar gameplay-wise with the turn-based combat system and everything, too. Actually reminds you a little bit of a cross between, I guess you could say, actually the Chrono series and like Star Ocean. Gameplay-wise, that's what it reminds me more of, more than anything else. But it's a really great game, and I highly recommend. As far as I'm concerned, perhaps the most underrated in the Resident Evil series. Yeah, it's probably about the best seller on this list, but it was the GameCube version and the PS2 version that are the best sellers. This is the underrated one, and in a lot of ways I feel is the superior version. Is the Dreamcast version of Resident Evil Code Veronica. Not Veronica X, Code Veronica. And unlike the PS2 version and everything, which of course had 1 disc, this is a double disc. Because it still had some more limitations to the Dreamcast at the time frame, since they weren't able to evolve more of the hardware and everything over time period, since it only had 2-year lifespans, the console. But the Dreamcast has some of the best games of any console ever, hands down. And trust me when I say this to me is really the last true Resident Evil game. Resident Evil 4 was okay, but to me this was the last true survival horror. Maybe even the creepiest game in the series. And the actual voice acting in this one actually is not horrible like Resident Evil 1 and 2 were. The voice acting in this one is actually tolerable. So it makes it a little bit better because of that. And I like the certain messed up camera angles and everything. It adds a little more creepiness factor as far as I'm concerned. But it depends on the person you ask. Coming in at number 3 for the original Xbox. Now I only have the dual version so I can't show exclusively. Jet Set Radio Future. Now, at one time I would have said Jet Grind Radio or Jet Set Radio was underrated, but now, given how much more people know of the original game and have played it because of the multiple re-releases of it on mobile, on 360, on PlayStation Network and everything, it's not so underrated now. but Jet Set Radio Future is, because Jet Set Radio Future, unlike Jet Set Radio or Jet Run Radio, has not gotten the HD treatment and been re-released like the first game. This is sort of like a prequel, sequel, kind of. It's really hard to describe it. It's like a reimagining, I guess you could say. To me, the music is even better in this game than the first game. And the gameplay is perfected. The first game was incredible, but to me, they perfected some of the flaws in the first game with this one. And I love Dr. K in it. He's just awesome. Coming in at number 2. Interestingly enough, the second game for PlayStation 1 called Bloody Roar 2, The New Breed. And it's produced by a small division that used to be around called Hudson Entertainment. Now, Hudson Entertainment was owned by a company we know, which actually shut Hudson Entertainment down and said this game would never get a 7th game in the series, unfortunately. And, of course, that is Konami. Of all companies, of course, would shut down Hudson Entertainment, Konami. It's a shame. To me, as a franchise, this is probably the most underrated fighting game franchise ever. Only game in the series that even got a greatest hits version was Bloody Roar, Primal Fury, which had 2 versions released. Extreme on the original Xbox, and Primal Fury on the GameCube. The GameCube version was the only version that actually ended up on a greatest hits list, sadly. But to me, such an underrated, such a great fine game. Great mechanics. Number 1 from Square. Of course, this is a re-release because I lost my original version. Squaresoft originally. Chrono Cross. To me, hands down, one of the most underrated RPGs ever. Yeah, it sold like about 1.5 to 2 million copies. Yeah, that's good, and made greatest hits. But it's so underrated because people today don't even talk about it. It's never even gotten a freaking re-release. Unlike Chrono Trigger, which had the Super Nintendo version, had re-released on the PlayStation 1, and it also got re-released on the DS. So it's gotten 2 re-releases, plus it's now on the Nintendo Store market. Yet this has yet to be re-released. And it's such a great game with like 40 plus playable characters in the game. And it's all real-time, no random battle encounters like Chrono Trigger. Full 3D environments, of course. And it's just such a great and underrated game. I just wish more people would appreciate Chrono Cross. But, of course, this is Goku-san DBZ. Please remember to thumbs up my video, like, subscribe, follow me at twitter.com/GokuSunDBZ, and stay tuned for a possible game review and discussion of, what was I talking about? Mirror's Edge Catalyst. So I'll see you next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel.